I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James White, Field Yates Meanakeims.
All right, so first play we're going to look at 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everyone? Mike Kadlick, Tayler Kyles here for CLNS Media, back with another episode of the Patriots Daily Podcast, powered by PrizePicks, powered by GameTime. And now, Taylor, for the beginning of the offseason, powered by a head coaching search for the Patriots. Lower third reads, breaking news, Patriots fired head coach Gerard Mayo. It's not much of breaking news now. It happened Sunday night. We are now on to Wednesday, but they're getting right after it with this head coaching search, and that is exactly where I want to start. We're going to get into Mike Vrabel. We're going to get into Ben Johnson, that argument, where they should go. Taylor's now leaning Ben Johnson, so I want to get his thoughts on that. We went after it on Twitter a little bit yesterday, but I want to articulate.
You went after me.
I was going to say, I want to articulate it in words instead of memes. So we'll get into all that. But first and foremost, what the Patriots have already done is interviewed 2 candidates. Byron Leftwich, former Jaguars quarterback, Tampa's offensive coordinator for several years down there with Tom Brady at the helm. I thought that was pretty notable. And then Pep Hamilton, a longtime offensive guru in the league. He's been an OC twice. He was with Indy for a while, and he was the Houston Texans offensive coordinator in 2022. He was also the head coach of the DC Defenders in the XFL, and he was also their general manager. I thought that was an interesting note. I think the biggest note here as well is that he coached Bazooka Joe Milton.
Yeah, there we go.
His quarterback's coach, and he's also done some media, and I know you pulled up the clip yesterday where he ranked the top 5 quarterbacks under 25.
Yeah, let me see if I can find it for us real quick. Yeah, I'll pull it up real quick. It was pretty incredible. I saw it in the offseason and thought the guy was losing his mind.
Was he already on the Patriots, or was this before the pre-draft process?
This was, I think, that's a good question. I think this might have been after he was already taken by the Patriots. Okay. But yeah, Pep Hamilton had Joe Milton as one of the top 5 young quarterbacks in the NFL. No sign of Drake May, no sign of any of the quarterbacks that were drafted in the first round. Just Joe Milton, which is fantastic.
That's so good.
Stand up for your guy. I respect it.
I was going to say riding with your guy. But yeah, so I want to get into this. Let's do the Rooney Rule discussion on top of it as well, because it's no secret they're 2 minority candidates. And look, I look at this, and I'll turn it over to you in a second, but I look at this sort of, yes, it's very fast. They did it quickly because both of these guys are also out of the league right now. They haven't coached. And so you can get them in the building right away. You don't have to wait because they're not in the postseason. Like Ben Johnson, which we'll get to, they couldn't interview him until today on Wednesday because of the rules around coaches that are currently with teams. So on one hand, it's speeding it up and it's getting these guys in the building to basically get them out and check the box, which is too bad. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people say the Rooney Rule is a sham. But on the other hand, it's 2 young offensive minds. And that's what the Patriots have lacked in this building, frankly, for quite some time. If you count Josh McDaniels in that conversation, sure. But they've sort of been archaic in their approach offensively. So on one hand, it sucks. On the other hand, fact-finding mission, bring these guys in, go through your head coaching search, and then maybe you bring them back around and keep them on the staff. But your thoughts on this, on these 2 guys, as well as them, frankly, like I said, being offensive minds that could work with your young quarterback in Drake May.
Yeah, so to address the Rooney Rule first, because that's the big thing here. They've been criticized by, I think, Albert Breer, Jordan Schultz, because if this is truly a sham process and they're only bringing these guys in because they need to satisfy the Rooney Rule, because that's what it looks like. Like we mentioned, they've been out of the league, so it is kind of an odd look. The 2 black coaches that you've interviewed so far haven't coached in a couple of years, so what's going on?
Yeah, it's not like there's requests out for Aaron Glenn or Anthony Weaver or Brian Flores. Like, those aren't reported yet. It's just bringing in the guys that are off the street, which is.
And Brian Flores even said, hey, if you want me, come and get me. I'll take the interview. But Flores' situation, I will say, is different specifically because he is currently suing the NFL. We talked about that. But either way, if this is a sham process and we find out that as soon as the Patriots can possibly hire Mike Vrabel, they do it, I don't like it. That's rotten. That is truly circumventing the Rooney Rule in a very disrespectful way. And I think that's
after they just did that a year ago, because yes, they did hire a black head coach, but another side of the Rooney Rule is bringing in other external minority candidates to get them in front of owners as well.
Exactly. So, and people can argue that Aaron Glenn's a better head coach and candidate than is Ben Johnson, because Aaron Glenn has lost so many of his key players like the Patriots did this year, and they are still one of the best defenses in the NFL. Aaron Glenn also more well-connected because he's been in the league for so long. So does it look suspicious? Absolutely. We've also had discussions about how, if we're being very honest, there aren't a lot of black head coaching candidates who come from the offensive side of the ball. You got Gerard Johnson with the Texans, but it's a very, very short list.
Yep. Now,
going even further into that, the Patriots process, look, if they have something that they want to look for, right or wrong, right? If they say it's Mike Vrabel or an offensive head coach who can connect with Drake May, be with Drake May throughout the rest of his career, what have you, I get that.
Sure.
Might be right, but you can also point to the fact there are very few defensive coaches in the NFL right now that have had sustained success. You can point to those things and say, you know what, that's fair if that's your criteria. So that kind of complicates things. Again, it should be the broadest search possible, where like Robert Kraft kind of made it sound like they were going to exhaust all resources and bring in a bunch of different people, kind of like what they did with their offensive coordinator search.
Right.
Bring in people from all these different brain trusts to give you different ideas. Like, all right, I kind of understand your process, even if I don't necessarily agree and think that you are hurting yourself by not entertaining any defensive coaches. But if they do just one offense, it's tough. The league is it's not great when it comes to hiring. We know the whole like equality thing is not really there.
Right.
Gerard Mayo, for being very honest, I know people call it a DEI hire. That's not what DEI means. What Gerard Mayo was, if anything, was a nepotism hire.
Sure.
Because Kraft admittedly loved him and didn't want to lose him and decided, you know what, I'm going to lock him down for the foreseeable future. Nepotism is rampant throughout the NFL, right? So these unfair hiring practices, they are what they are. I am not saying they are right. I am not saying I agree. But again,
it's not just the Patriots that do it, I think is what you're getting at.
And that's not to justify it, but it's to say
Sure.
that the Rooney Rule doesn't stop the unfair practices, as we know. And there are also other times where the way that the NFL hiring process works just kind of is unfair, no matter what race, gender, creed, or whatever you are. Right. Again, this is such a sensitive topic, and I'm not trying to undermine the very serious problem the NFL has in terms of diversity in its coaching circles. And I don't want to accuse the Patriots if we do find out once again this was a fake search and these guys were only brought in, like not even with the offensive coordinator search when they hired Bill O'Brien. Right. Where they brought other guys in like Adrian Clem, we were talking about before the show you brought up, where Adrian Clem, yes, he was interviewed, was never going to get the offensive coordinator job, but was ultimately brought on, as the offensive line coach. Obviously didn't work out, but I feel like the only way to satisfy the Rooney Rule without being completely condescending is to do it in a way where, one, you're giving some coaches experience, you're getting their names back in the cycle, where it's like, oh, all right, Pep Hamilton interviewed for a head coaching job. What did it sound like? The NFL is connected. You hear things.
The owners talk, and that's what it does. It gets them back in front of somebody's face. It gets them in front of Elliott Wolf's face, where, look, I mean, Pep Hamilton, someone who I mentioned in the intro, but has been around the league. And so he's out for a year, and people might forget about him. All the hot shots come back, and your Kevin O'Connells of the world, and I'm bringing up head coaches and Sean McVay, but the Clint Kubiaks and like these guys, right? All of a sudden, Pep Hamilton's by the wayside, where when there is a rule that you need to bring in minorities, and in this situation, it's you can do it so early because he's not actively coaching. Like you said, it gets him back in the cycle. It gets him in front of not only Robert Kraft, but Elliott Wolf, where another team's looking for an OC down the line. Hey, Elliott, what did Pep sound like? What is he bringing? How has he evolved? And so it ultimately, like you said, gets them back in that rotation.
Mm-hmm. And then, so there's getting them in the rotation, and like we mentioned, the whole aspect of, well, you could be interviewing them to potentially bring them in for another job. Like you mentioned, Leftwich has the Brady connection. I'm sure that's attractive to a degree. And you do want someone who develops Drake May. So Pep Hamilton, Byron Leftwich, both guys who've had success in that vein. So again, I feel like I'm going in circles at this point, but if they did it and it's a BS process and they have no intention of actually even seeing if these guys could play a role on the team, bad, gross, blech.
Right.
If they at least did it to do these guys a solid and everybody who was involved in this understood exactly what was happening, and Vrabel isn't just basically penciled in right now, I understand it, but really it's a problem with the rule because you force people to not interview one minority coach, but two. And the fact is, a lot of these guys already have their minds made up on what exactly they're looking for. And when you shrink that down to offense for minority candidates, the unfortunate truth is there just aren't very many, and it's hard to do the process justice.
And the way we will find out, Taylor, if it is a sham process, is if by the end of the week, it's Mike Vrabel, it's a Zoom interview with Ben Johnson, and then they They talked to Vrabel Thursday. They hire him Friday, and we're back down in Foxboro for a press conference on Braves. So we're going to get into that. I want to get into Vrabel. I want to get into Ben Johnson. But before we do, quick word from our sponsors. First and foremost, we're going to start with our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all, and all you got to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's the playoffs, so it is now or never. Don't miss out on these last few weeks of football action with PrizePicks, the best place to win cash while watching the postseason. They now offer MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season, and PrizePicks always puts their members first. Withdrawals are fast, so safe and secure. When your picks hit, you get your money in as little as 15 minutes. So you think Lamar Jackson will get more than 250 passing yards next week? Will Patrick Mahomes pass for more than 1.5 touchdowns in the divisional round? Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you run your game on PrizePicks. Sign up today. All you got to do is download the app and use code CLNS for $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That is code CLNS. Download PrizePicks. Use the code CLNS. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. We are also powered by GameTime. It is the best ticketing app out there. They have their new feature. It's called GameTime Picks, and what it does is make getting tickets to events even easier. I just mentioned the playoffs in the previous read, but this is the best way to get to postseason NFL action. It is through GameTime. They have super deals. They have seat views. The best feature they have, in my opinion, besides the all-in pricing, which I'll get to, is their seat view feature, because not all ticketing apps have that, where you don't know if you're going to be sitting behind a pole, if you're going to be sitting way too far away. You don't think you're going to have the right view, but in the GameTime app, you can click and see exactly what the field in front of you is going to look like. And my favorite is the all-in pricing, because you don't get hit with the hidden fees or the tax or all that nonsense. When you're scanning the app, it tells you exactly what you're going to pay at checkout. So if you want to get to the playoffs this postseason, use the GameTime app to do so. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And Taylor, what time is it?
Game time.
It is game time. And it's also time to talk about this Mike Vrabel, Ben Johnson debate that not just me and you, but the entire social media verse, the TV, I guess the TV world, yeah, all that aspects. It's Mike Vrabel, it's Ben Johnson. It feels like those are the top 2 candidates, not only in Foxboro, but really across the entire NFL. So there is still a request for Ben Johnson to interview with the Patriots. It has been widely reported that he will be taking that interview. Now, it can only be on Zoom this week. He can't come in person until the next round of the playoffs, essentially. So, mentioned before in the last segment that if it is a sham process, that it's basically we'll find out if they bring in Vrabel, they hire him, and they don't even see Ben Johnson through, and they get off that Zoom call that they have and say, you know what, we're going with Vrabel. So signs are pointing to Mike Vrabel being the guy, and I'll say it right off the bat. I still think that is the right move, is Mike Vrabel. Now, I do think you should see Ben Johnson through, but the fact that the Raiders have now let go of Antonio Pierce, there is a real Mike Vrabel connection there. Vrabel is meeting with the Bears on Wednesday. The Saints want to speak with him as well. So everybody wants Vrabel just like you do. So both sides have a little leverage here, because it's also been reported that Mike Vrabel does want to come to New England. So it's going to be a little bit of a cat and mouse game over the next couple weeks. But ultimately, my argument against Ben Johnson right now, Taylor, is it's still the unknown. We just went through the unknown with Gerard Mayo, where he comes in and can he build a culture, and can he build a vibe, and is he going to be able to garner a room? And I know that Ben Johnson has done that for the offensive side of the football with the Lions. I just think ultimately ownership is going to be nervous to hand over the keys to the franchise to this guy. But I want to hear your argument on it, because over the last week or two on our shows and in our stand-ups and when we've been talking down in Foxboro, Me and you have been on the same page where go get Mike Vrabel. He's the guy. He can be that. But you've done some research now over the last couple of days, and you've leaned Ben Johnson now. So I'm saying all this, I'm introing it all this because Ben Johnson is going to have the opportunity to zoom in and meet with Robert Kraft and the Brain Trust. What does he have to tell them? What's your argument on why he should be the head coach of the New England Patriots?
So one, I just think comparing him to Mayo, the more I've kind of looked into it, it's just not fair. Even the Dan Campbell stuff, like I didn't really remember this, but the fact that Dan Campbell had been an assistant head coach for the Saints for several years after being the interim head coach for the Dolphins, like Dan Campbell wasn't some guy who stumbled into a head coaching job. He
was prepared
for half a decade. Like, so I want to start off with that. Mayo was so grossly underprepared, which wasn't totally his fault, but that was the case. I don't necessarily think there's a whole lot of candidates that are even put in the position that he was with as few qualifications as he had. So first, I want to kind of nip that in the bud.
It's like Jeff Saturday and Gerard Mayo. Like Jeff Saturday had none, and then it's basically Mayo.
Right. Like it's just they're in such different stratospheres. So I don't even think those comparisons are the same, but it obviously will still color the Kraft's decision-making because you just did have rookie head coach wanted to do one thing, had all the right ideas, but didn't know how to execute it. With Ben Johnson, and I will say with Mike Vrabel, if he's hired, like I'm not going to be upset. He brings,
and I'm the same way. The reverse with Ben Johnson. So like it's the two top candidates. If they get one of them, I'll be happy. I just lean Vrabel and you lean Johnson.
100%. They're the top candidates for a reason, and it's funny because they are the opposites in so many ways. Where the thing one guy brings, the other doesn't, but then he brings something else that the other guy doesn't. So. With Ben Johnson, it was funny how many connections I actually had. I was putting together a little like document to kind of get all the information together and understand their background, stats, all those things. Ben Johnson has a ton of kind of overlaps with the Patriots, the New England area, and Drake May specifically. Like he won an award for playing football in North Carolina. He was a walk-on quarterback at UNC. His offense is influenced by Clyde Christensen, who is the guy who went on the Pat McAfee show and gushed about Drake May because they worked together when Drake was at UNC. Clyde Christensen is a legendary quarterback coach and offensive mind. So there's all that stuff with Drake May. He also went to BC. He coached at BC, so that was pretty significant. So he's familiar with the Boston area, at least was hired by Matt Patricia. Like there's a ton of things you see where it's like, okay, a lot of overlap. Yeah, like I see where this would make sense. The Patricia thing isn't huge, but it's kind of just one other thing to throw in there. Like, oh, that's ironic. So beyond that, like the fact that you have some overlap with Drake May, the fact that you know Boston does not mean that you are going to be an effective head coach. Right. What really started to get my mind running was the fact that connections seem like the biggest red flag for Ben Johnson because he's a younger coach. He's the same age as Rod Mayo. So you're saying, all right, you don't want to have the same mistake. But Mayo was never outside of the Patriots organization in the football world. He was in the media world. He was in the business world. But his connections were pretty much just very tightly wound within the building in New England. And then obviously burned bridges with Bill Belichick, potentially with Bill O'Brien because of how he was publicly calling out the offense back in 2023. Ben Johnson hasn't just been on the Detroit staff, which also, the fact that he has been a coordinator and play caller for not only a top 5 offense for 3 straight years, but one of the best cultures in the NFL. That's a resume you can't really point to in a lot of other places where when you think of some like young offensive, wonderkins that have flamed out or aren't really what people maybe thought they would be. Mike McDaniel is kind of the poster child, I feel like. But with Mike McDaniel, he was the offensive coordinator for the 49ers, but it wasn't his offense. It was Kyle Shanahan's offense, similar with Alex Van Pelt. He was not the play caller. It was not his offense. There were a lot of principles that he obviously agreed with and connected with. That's Ben Johnson's offense because Dan Campbell's a CEO head coach. He probably has input. He has final say, but that is Ben Johnson's offense. So he's going to come in and give you that innovative, fresh, forward-thinking mindset. The guy was studied math in college. The whole analytics thing with him is not fugazi. He's actually a really smart guy where the analytics stuff is going to come with him. So the forward-thinking ideas when it comes to, hopefully at least, we don't know this for a fact, we don't know his pitch, but what you would think given his background is he would be analytically minded and willing to kind of build out that part of the staff. Obviously, the Lions have been one of the best personnel departments in the NFL. So if you can take something from there, the ideas that he has, they're also a very well-balanced offense. They actually run the ball quite a lot. If they can run the ball down your throat, similar to kind of Philly, because they have the tools, They will. Now, how much of that is Dan Campbell? I don't know. Maybe that's him wanting to lean into it. Maybe Ben Johnson will be more pass heavy. I don't really know. But the fact that the Lions are so tough, they're so well coached, that it is truly Ben Johnson's offense. And he has connections outside of Detroit because, oh my God, I went so off topic because I kind of started going about Ben Johnson. But with the connections, not only has he been in Detroit, he was on Joe Philbin's Dolphin staff. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not going to excite a lot of people because that staff got fired. They
weren't great. It was very fast. It was hard knocks it out basically for Philbin in Miami. But
they did have a lot of older coaches on that staff who've gone out to other places in the NFL and had success. Joe Philbin also, because if you're saying, okay, Ben Johnson, he needs to basically, like when you're a kid and you get a credit card or a debit card or whatever, your parent has to co-sign with you. I think for any first-year head coach, there should be a co-sign of, yes, I have this person who's going to join the staff with me. For Mayo, it was Ben McAdoo. But McAdoo was an Elliott Wolf guy. I don't really know that Gerard Mayo ever truly bought into the Wolf guys. And that was where all the seniority on the staff was coming from. Joe Philbin has been a head coach, and he overlapped with Elliott Wolf as he was rising up the ranks in Green Bay. So it's someone he's at least familiar with, and we know that Ben Johnson does respect Elliott Wolf. Maybe that's part of the reason why, because Philbin knows him and, word gets around in the NFL, obviously. You also have a guy like Darren Rizzi, who was named the interim head coach for the Saints when they fired Dennis Allen and has been a special teams coordinator for a long time. He had stops in Rhode Island. He had stops at New Haven. So, he's been a New England guy. Overlaps with Philbin, has that assistant. He was assistant head coach under Sean Payton as well. If Ben Johnson is going to bring a staff full of veteran coaches, a nice mix, but a few former head coaches, former assistant head coaches, that answers a lot of questions for me because it gives
that answers my question. That's my argument, is the inexperience and the idea that you can't go in and garner a room and be a leader of men. But if you bring in those guys and you give that pitch this week, it's going to give the Crafts and the Patriots brass a real, okay, maybe we should actually see this thing through.
100%. And if you do have that backing, like the leader of men stuff, you still can't prove it until you get in the building.
Of course.
Because, Ben Johnson's probably great with the Lions, but what happens when you have a losing season?
Right.
What happens if you have another, you go 5-12 next year or whatever? Can you sustain that? Can you be the kind of guy that keeps the ship going forward, keeps buy-in, has players playing tough and disciplined, and your preparation is always intact, like all of those things? At least with more older veteran coaches who've been in those leadership positions, you have guardrails. Right. So maybe he's not the guy early on, but he can learn from those other guys, lean on them, and doesn't have to take on so much on his own. And he can truly be the offense's head coach like he's been in Detroit. Maybe hires Lou Anarumo, another guy who was on that Dolphins staff. Lou Anarumo, from what I've heard, I spoke to Joe Goodberry, friend of the show, was giving me a lot of insight into why Lou Anarumo was fired. Apparently, it was because they had such a young defense, and he didn't adapt to that young talent, didn't like playing them. Sound kind of familiar? Sounds like the older Patriots, where it was big on confusing quarterbacks, doing a lot of complicated things. The Patriots have a pretty much veteran defense. They're probably going to sign some free agents, but it's highly unlikely they have any starters who haven't been in the league for at least 3 seasons. Mm-hmm. That's pretty huge. So Lou Anarumo in a division with Josh Allen, in a division with Tua Tagovailoa, in a conference with some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, having a guy like Lou Anarumo is a massive advantage. So Lou Anarumo can lead the defense. Ben Johnson can lead the offense. And then you have these other guys once again to kind of help him with the CEO things because he's still going to be involved in the offense like Kevin Stefanski, but take on other responsibilities. Right. So that's why when I kind of looked into it, I'm saying I feel like now it makes Vrabel to me seem almost too safe because with Vrabel, obviously, what you're going to get from him. He's the CEO type. He's the leader, the culture. They're going to be tough. They're going to play above their grade, whatever the boxing terminology is. Like all of those things.
Above their class.
Thank God, that was going to drive me crazy. But at the same time, he's going to have to hire new coordinators on a pretty consistent basis if they have success. If the offensive coordinator is great, that guy's going to get hired away within a year or two. Defensive coordinator is great. Less likely he'll get hired away, but always a risk. And there's constantly going to be turnover. That's the risk you run, and a good CEO head coach should be able to find more coaches to fill those voids. But with Ben Johnson, you could potentially have one of those forward-thinking offensive minds to work with Drake May for his entire career. That's a huge advantage. And you flip potentially, obviously, they're not going to be top 5 next year, the Patriots. Have a long way to go. But you have the groundwork to say this could be one of the best offenses in the league within the next 2 or 3 years. With Vrabel, you don't really have those same assurances. We don't even know who his staff's going to be.
Right.
So I get, and we don't know who Johnson's is either necessarily. I want to put that out there as well. A lot of this is up in the air, but if Ben Johnson did bring a veteran staff, I feel like he's the best coach for you. And there is a bit of risk there, but it's kind of like Drake May, where, hey, if you get fired because you took a swing, different with ownership or with head coach, I get that. It's not exactly the same thing, but I really do feel like Mike Vrabel, especially if you bring him in and hire him right away, and Ben Johnson doesn't even get a chance to come in the building, I don't really love that kind of process.
And that's why it's so tricky with where ownership is right now because of, again, I bring up the Raiders as a lurker here with Brady in that building where Vrabel could come in here and be like, hey, look, I want to have this conversation and I'm your guy, but I'm going to see this through. I deserve to see this through. I sat out a year. I went and I learned the analytics and I worked on the offense with Cleveland. And I have this lined up where, hey, maybe I bring in Josh and he's not going to leave my side if we pay him right, or vice versa. I know these, I made these connections. I know these offensive coaches. I don't know them off the top of my head, but if he comes in with a certain argument, hey, but don't go interview Ben Johnson again. I'm your guy. Let's get this done. I want to come in here. I want the corner office by Monday, and we're going to turn this thing around. And that's going to be hard for the Crafts to not, to sort of give that up. But I think, too, as you said, in the sort of sales pitch you gave for Johnson is the right one, where he has that Zoom meeting, whether it's today or tomorrow, with them and be like, look, I understand you just went through X, Y, which those are the questions they're going to be asked. They're going to be like, look, we just went through a nightmare scenario with a rookie head coach. What's different about you? What do you know? What have you learned? And how are you going to sort of turn this thing around for us? And it's going to be those veteran head coaches that we just mentioned. So look, I like the pitch. It's a good argument, and it makes me I'm sort of still where I was. Like, I'm still not leaning Johnson. I'm still on the Vrabel train. I do just like the connection. I like what he's done. And we had talked about it where his detriment in Tennessee was the quarterback position, and the ultimate sort of get the hell out of here was I don't agree with the front office and the Hall of Fame.
Front office just fired the GM they picked over him, by the way.
Yeah, maybe you should have kept Mike Vrabel all along. And that's the thing is everyone. I keep getting these tweets and all this stuff where Vrabel wasn't a good head coach. Like BS. Vrabel was a really good head coach in Tennessee. They had a ton of success, and then he just kind of got hamstrung by the front office and the quarterback position. They had to pay Ryan Tannehill, and the rest was history. So I still lean Vrabel. It's certainly enticing with Ben Johnson, the offensive connection. That's the thing that still scares me the most. But I do think with Drake May, whether it's Alex Van Pelt, whether it's somebody close to that system, where Vrabel now has built connections in Cleveland, right? So you can bring in that same style of offense for year 2 of Drake May. And by that time, Drake May, he's already a stud. After year 2 of the same system, he's going to be a stud even more. And even if you have to bring in somebody else, it's still his offense, and he's going to be okay because now he's heading into year 3 and he's already a superstar, frankly. So
and on the defensive side of the ball, like Lou Anarumo might not leave. Like, he's an older coach. There's not a whole lot of guys who are in their 50s. I don't know exactly. Actually, let me see. How old is Lou Anarumo? I feel like he's in his late 50s.
Guessing 50s, yeah.
Oh, age 58. Like,
okay.
Not a lot of 60-year-old defensive coordinators getting hired for head coaching jobs. So the same argument for Vrabel, he might have Josh McDaniels, which honestly, I hope he doesn't settle for Josh. The more I've thought about it, the less I love the idea. I know he's adaptable, but it's just like we haven't seen him really build a modern offense. So I have questions there significantly.
I like the adaptability of the offense with Josh, and I like the fact that it's probably a continuity plan as well, where he ain't going nowhere for a long time.
But that might be the case if you hire Ben Johnson and Lou Anarumo. The leader of the offense, the leader of the defense might never leave.
Right. That's what's so enticing about the offensive coach. Like, that's my argument with Vrabel and McDaniels is it's Vrabel. He's done it before. He's had success. He knows how to run a football team. And then Josh he's the OC and he's basically the offensive head coach. But if it's Ben Johnson, not that you get 2-1 because you don't know for sure if Ben Johnson can lead the room, but you know that if he can, he's going to be the offense, and that's going to be the offense for the rest of the time, hopefully. So,
and if that offense is good, it's going to be hard for him to lose the whole team. Like,
right.
With the Kyle Shanahans and everything, it's basically like, yeah, it's your offense, you're innovative. Like, there's a level of respect for you automatically if your offense is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So if he's able to do that, and he can stay consistent, stay ahead of the curve, I mean, yeah, you need to still be a leader of men, but if you have a Lou Anarumo who's done it on defense, like you can have kind of your own two little worlds and just have a guy who can walk the line. And like Sirianni doesn't do. I keep coming back to him because he's like the poster child of like, what does this guy do exactly? I don't know. He just doesn't mess up, and he stays out of the way, and he hires good coaches. Like, if you can just do your job and stay in your lane and not step on people's toes, still be able to build that culture, which we don't know if he can. But again, if you have the backing of other guys who've done it, it makes me feel better. I don't know. I just keep going back and forth on it. I feel like the Vrabel stuff is slipping for me because I'm starting to like Ben Johnson so much.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, both these guys are great candidates. And I think personally, outside of just having a ready-made roster, the Patriots are the best team that you could possibly go to. It's the Patriots and the Bears, and the Patriots have more stable ownership. And I think you could just say which quarterback you like better. But if you're talking about a franchise quarterback who's going to lead the locker room, sorry, I'm leaning Drake May. And I've said that since before the draft.
Right now, Drake's at least more proven already, and he seems like more of a sure thing. Caleb's still a mystery, but you can also obviously fall in love with that skill set. And he was in a nightmare scenario. And obviously, the jury's not out on Caleb Williams in Chicago. But two very enticing head coach candidates for the Patriots. Mike Vrabel interviewing on Thursday. Ben Johnson set up for a potential virtual interview over the coming days. We will see what happens with the search, and myself and Tayler Kyles will be here on Patriots Daily for all of the updates along the way. So make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to the Patriots Press Pass channel here. Subscribe to the podcast as well on any audio feeds if you're there. And keep it here. Keep it locked in. Comment. Let us know what you want to hear because we're going to be here every single day just about to take you through the offseason. So for Tayler, I'm Mike Kadlick. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we will see you all next time. Peace out, everyone.